What up, roomies? Tonight on Neighbors, we're going deep, and I mean real deep. Our guest, Mazona Shahar, works at the intersection of consciousness, eugenics, inherited trauma, and human evolution. She spent over 3 decades studying how patterns we inherit emotionally, neurologically, and even ancestrally shape the way we live, react, and create our reality. She doesn't call it healing; she calls it consciousness reconstruction. Manzona, welcome to Neighbors and Roomies. You already know.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh man, such a
That was a mouthful, right?
it really was. And thank you for being patient with me. Like I was so caught off guard. I was like, oh snap, I thought I got here first.
I was a week early, remember?
Yeah. No, but I'm so excited that you're on. Like when I had like read your comment, I found out exactly what you did. I was like, yo, I need to talk to you because it's like when people talk about like trauma healing or ancestral healing or like inherited trauma, they always try to get like real spiritual with it. But I see that you're more of on like a scientifical path, and I really
Yeah,
enjoy that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So it's like you can have, I feel that there's a balance to everything, and I've had a lot of like the spiritual stuff. So I want to hear from somebody who's more. I don't want to say grounded, but you know,
I'm very grounded
but
in
on a
my
different,
chaos.
but on a different wave. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so my work is kind of informed by both. My key area of interest and sort of specialization is epigenetics, which
Yeah.
is the social emotional genealogical heritage. And also then radical behavioralism. And I am also a clairvoyant medium. So I do have that spiritual side as well. So I'm kind of sitting right in the scales of science and spirituality, if you like, which then creates hugely impactful change because epigenetics is where we've come from. And I kind of
Yeah.
view humanity as a consequence, if you like, or totally entrained by our inherited genealogically. And when I'm working with clients in the spiritual realm, it's all past life regression and, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had those
Yeah.
conversations.
I've had those conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, we've all had those conversations.
Yeah.
Whereas mine is very much entrenched in your ancestors.
Mm. Okay.
You know,
Okay.
it's
So it's like direct ancestors, or we're talking like way back.
We're talking about the actual line. So I can go when I'm working with somebody as a clairvoyant medium, we can go back through several generations, but it's generational trauma that we're dealing with. So quite a lot of sort of scarcity mindset, the sort of overwhelm of emotions in the biological system, in the energetic system, biological system, whichever language you want to speak, comes from our heritage. So if we've got
Yeah.
people, for example, that have come from, war-torn countries, poverty, which is so everywhere,
Yeah.
name a
Facts.
country that hasn't dealt with that really, in 3 generations and in this generation and in the last generation, so
Yeah.
war breeds scarcity. People move different countries. They come in with a certain mindset of I'm providing my children with freedom, but they're carrying this trauma. They want their kids to be free, but they also want them to be safe is really what they're trying to do. But they impart all of this trauma onto the kids in that now free space, which
Yeah.
causes like a real clash of emotions. And that's where we're seeing so much mental illness. There's like increases in depression, anxiety, detachment, that combined with the society that we live in, which is all about pressure, financial
Yeah.
pressure, trying to achieve. Everyone's kind of going in all these different directions, and the human spirit is collapsing as a result. And that's what's causing so many of the problems today.
No, I feel you on that, especially with like how society is currently moving and at the rate it's moving. It constantly feels like the younger you are, the more pressure you have because of the way everything is evolving. Like, you know, I'm I'm a millennial, and I feel that because of the fact that I've seen the transition between digital and analog, I kind of have a different perspective on life. But I feel that
Yeah.
all the other generations, like the younger generations, have like this pressure to keep up and not be able to like pause for a second and like deal with like what they're going through. Even though I've seen that with the newer generations that they have a more of a let me be at peace kind of mindset, or at least like the younger generation that I know personally. I see that they
Yeah.
want to have like more of like a peaceful mindset versus like my generation where it was like, oh, we're trying to be high achievers, we're trying to constantly compete and all this other things. But yet again, I know this from like being a a first generation immigrant, and also the people around me are also in that same category.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting when I'm talking to, especially like my kids, I've said, they're 18 and
Yeah,
20, or just turning 18, and their consciousness level of understanding is actually really great. And the way that they can actually communicate and break things down is awesome as compared to older, even add
yeah,
10 years, add 15 years, and you've still got that I need to succeed and I need to have this before I can do that. And I've got, so it's really interesting watching all the different ages and how they're responding. And also, a lot of the kids at school now, the pathways to jobs with AI, they're not there. It's like someone wanting to be a paralegal, but it's not there. There's an overflow of PTs because everyone wants to be an influencer. So it's,
true,
there's a lot of sort of unknowing of where they're going to be going and what they're going to be doing. And it's almost created a bit of a break in maybe giving them the space to ask who are they and having more of a question around what do I actually want to do, because all the things that my parents have told me I have to do aren't here anymore. So
true.
it's interesting.
No, it definitely is, especially seeing that um parental guidance now, especially parental guidance, it comes from age where information is not wasn't as rapid or not as accessible as it is
Yeah,
now. You know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just ask ChatGPT anything.
That's a big fact. Big facts on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and obviously the amount of scrolling. I mean, when I started working, on social media for my business, I think the scroll rate was something like 2.5 seconds, and now it's like 0.2 seconds or something.
Yo,
It's
the people's attention is just getting shorter and shorter and shorter nowadays
Yeah,
when it
it
comes to
really
that.
is. It really is, and it's really interesting because in order to really be able to heal in that ancestral kind of timeline, that takes time. It
Yeah,
depends. Sometimes I might get a client who just wants to walk along the beach free from their family and not feel guilty about it, and not feel like they're sort of being selfish or whatever. And that could just be one session and we're good to go. But if
yeah,
someone wants to move from severe trauma but wants to create something that's going to make great change in society, then that's going to be a longer duration. And it's very interesting that the social media kind of scroll rate, if you like,
yeah,
leans into fixing your problems in less than 5 seconds, but it's not that way. It's something that you commit to. There's always layers. I mean, even myself, I had a
yeah.
massive meltdown 2 weeks ago.
What
Going through a big
happened?
change. Hmm?
What happened that you melted down? What was going on?
Well, you got to melt down to level up.
Yeah,
I always talk about the more information that you're receiving, the more downloads that you're
yeah.
receiving, the more trauma or really core trauma you need to
Yeah.
release.
No, I got you
Um,
on that. Yeah,
you're right. So it's that kind of capacity to receive is relevant to what is in your container. So you've got to keep clearing. So the higher you go and the more that you're doing, the more you need to clear those traumas. Like I was super shy. Like it took me until probably 32 or something to
yeah,
actually be able to speak in front of more than two people. Like so shy. And then with my work, as it evolved, I just kind of was teaching two people energy healing, and then I was teaching 10 people, and then then I went online, and then I was teaching five, so it just sort of grew as I learned to release that shyness, but over
yeah.
time.
No, no, it definitely when you have certain things like shyness, because I used to be a shy person as well.
Yeah,
Your comfort level gets it increases as the more you do it. You know what I mean? But that's just like when people have a fear of something and they don't know that what at that other side of fear would bring them joy.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I always say sometimes, people go, the universe give me a sign. And I'm like, the universe is giving you a sign. You're just choosing not to do it. The
Well,
universe is always giving you signs of what you should be doing. But that fear structure, like can't do it because of money, can't do it because of this, or I've got to do that, or blah, 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 all these blocks. And I'm like, well, the universe is telling you what to do. You're just choosing that's not your path. And the more you resist that path, the more you're going to be,
yeah,
pushing up a hill.
yeah, true. So when people go to you for like ancestral healing, right? For how does like what are the steps that person has to take, or like what does that look like exactly?
So generally when I'm working in a session, it can get kind of busy in the room. So
Yeah,
as a clairvoyant medium, I see to the left of me their ancestral line. And when I'm looking as in the vision is in my head, right?
yeah,
Um, I can see sort of blocks, or I can see people that want to say something, things that have happened, disconnections. But I also then have like the divine inspiration telling me what their immediate problems are in the present moment. And so generally in a session, we'll work together to resolve those immediate problems.
yeah.
That might be talking about family members, because I can channel everyone through everybody. So it might be talking about family members and what they need, how they're showing up. We'll get all those things sorted out immediately, because until those things are addressed, I can't move on. They won't talk to me, and I can't move past the divine, right?
All right. So you
Yeah.
got to go through step one first, which is take care of the now.
Take care of the now. Where are we at
Okay.
right now?
Okay. Okay.
Then we will work in what you don't know. So it's like a regression therapy into your younger years. Because what happens a lot with people that do regression therapy or trauma therapy is that they're working with the person on what they can remember,
Uh-huh.
and it's not what you can remember. They're the events that have happened as a subsequently to an original trauma. That we are conscious in our mother's tummies, because
Yeah.
we're conscious, we're alive. So we're receiving information of what the world around us or your mother looks like. And that's being fed into us. So there's a lot of, sometimes, mums can just feel like, oh, I hope I'm going to be good enough to be a mum. I hope I'm going to get this right, and that feeling of insecurity can get actually transposed to the child, but the child doesn't understand that's what the mum's actually trying to do a good job here, and she wants
Yeah.
to make this be right, but that is interpreted as an insecurity, and the child actually can believe that the world around them is unsafe. And then when they're
Okay.
born, then if they're in a nurturing environment, we're all good. That gets resolved and we move forward. But if we're not in a nurturing environment, then that gets founded, that
Yeah.
becomes fact. And then you go through the stages of development. So at the creation of your central nervous system is the creation of your base chakra. And this is where, if you focus only on the spirituality, you're missing this whole aspect of science and creation. So
Yeah.
the base chakra is connected right into the central nervous system creation. Then you are born. Then you find out as a child whether or not you're safe. Then you go into that next energetic center, which is in alignment with the development about your childhood trauma, between
Yeah.
ages of 3 to 5. Then you go into the creation of the identity, and that's it. That's what's created through your environment. Your heart, your throat, your third eye, all of that stuff, that's already there. And now we're just interpreting the world around us and seeing what's going on. And then we live those informed traumas
Yeah.
from being conceived all the way through to birth for the rest of our lives. And up until 21 is when you start to realize that actually, maybe this is a repeated pattern that I'm doing here, and maybe I need to change this. But that's not until 21, because you're going to practice everything that you've learned up until 21.
No, I got you on that. So you would say like besides the emotional state that your mother is in when she's carrying you, right?
Yeah.
Your environment has a lot to do whether it's going to reinforce your. We're gonna double go back 1 second, like your insecurities, like you said. We're gonna
Yeah.
so that would like reinforce it, or basically I don't want to say cure, but like you know
Yeah.
kind of like take that away from
Yeah.
you, because your environment would either nurture you to like get past that or reinforce it. Am I following
Exactly.
correct? Am I following correctly so far?
Absolutely. And there's your
Right.
epigenetics, social
All
emotional
right.
influences.
Okay. So
Yeah.
quick question: does trauma like also gets transferred? Like, because I know you do. I know we're speaking about the ancestral trauma healing. Is trauma more of the ancestral trauma? Is it more of like a spiritual thing, or is it like passed down through like DNA memory? Because I do feel like
Yes.
DNA. I feel like DNA because of the fact that we know that DNA is data. Like it
Yeah.
also could hold like memories from like previous generations that have been passed down through your bloodline.
100%. That's exactly where I'm viewing my work from, exactly through that lens. There is some scientific evidence been done on that. A lot of the science evidence is more different kind of influences, but epigenetics does have its own window of science. They haven't quite got to the DNA altercation,
Yeah,
changes. I absolutely am 100% down for that. I think that's exactly what's happening here. And when we look at DNA as being the temple, right? That's the
yeah,
temple, that's the carry down. What is actually the flexible kind of gene in that is actually the RNA.
no,
So
right?
you have your DNA, which is your two strands. Then you have your RNA, which is a single strand. The RNA's job is to take a photocopy of certain information from the DNA and then create genes and what have you as a result. My little kind of philosophy in that is that what happens if the photocopier sees an I as a T? And so when it's copying from the DNA, every
Yeah,
time there's an I, it sees a T, and then the T is then replicated into the cells. That's where I'm kind of leading a thought process in that. That's my own philosophy. I just want to make that really clear. I'm not anything to do with science. I
yeah,
actually received I was doing a lot of really intense meditations for about 6 months, like every day,
yeah,
3 hours of really intense meditations. And I received this download, and it was just like, RNA is crystallized emotion. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. What's RNA? At that time, it was just a
yeah,
message. And then that's when I researched DNA, RNA, and that's kind of led me into epigenetics. And I use that philosophy or that view to be able to go back and change. Because when I'm working, if you imagine guilt as an
yeah.
example of an emotion, that sits all over the body. And that is what leads to your kind of autoimmunes or your anxieties because of the breathing. It sits in the lungs, in order to get guilt out of the system, then resetting the central nervous system and rewiring the brain, essentially.
Yeah.
You've got to work in ancestral because that's inherited. That can be an inherited emotion, because I work with a lot of people that may have lots of trauma in their lives, but the level of the emotions that they're carrying is far greater than their life experience. And that's your first trigger to know that someone in that heritage
Yeah.
has that emotion. And that's where we need to go back to and release it from there to be able to release it all the way through the line. Does that make sense? I feel like I've
No,
gone off
no,
track.
no, no. It makes
I
it
get
makes
very
no,
excited.
no, no. It makes perfect sense because the way I'm like kind of like putting it together as an example,
Yeah.
like I'm gonna piggyback off your photocopy example, right? Is like when you're born, you have you're this brand new printer, you're this brand new photocopy machine, right? And then
Yeah.
as your life goes on, there's certain things, certain glitches that happen that when the next mechanic comes in and they build another one of you, this time with different parts, there's those glitches and those kinks come along with it.
Yes,
If that makes sense.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. And I think that's where more research should be done in genes, in that, from that view, just to see what is actually going on. Because we can see that, in a particular line, for example, there's a lot of trauma, like social trauma.
yeah,
um and you can see the implications in the behaviors in that third generation back, which then raise the next generation. Social and emotional starts kicking in there. And then you have your third generation with heightened propensity to, well, even neurodivergence, the heightened aspects of neurodivergence that aren't really neurodivergence as a pathology. It's not like, it's
oh,
not so much that, it's
oh,
actually created through the traumas.
all right, I got you. Hold on real quick. Can you explain what neurodivergency is to me? because I've heard a couple of different like explanations for it, but I've never gotten like a real clear one.
So neurodivergence is the autism spectrum for
Okay,
ease, but it
okay,
covers from start to finish,
okay.
like every single aspect. And we're seeing a lot of adults getting, especially after COVID, we're seeing a lot of adults being diagnosed with neurodivergence, but are we looking at the traumas?
Mm,
Because, like, are we looking
yeah,
at the
yeah,
traumas
definitely.
that have happened in that line? Is it just a standalone, happened from nowhere situation? Or is it actually coming from childhood trauma? Like even a child that experiences a lot of violence in the home later in life can display aspects of neurodivergence in terms of oversensitive to environments, not being able to, touch, having to control their environment to the point where other people in their environment can't touch anything. you
Yeah,
know, they could be diagnosed with neurodivergence, but no, they would actually be better served to go to someone that can actually regression therapy back to the original traumas and release those, because they're intensified behavioral patterns that look like neurodivergence, but they're not. So I think so much more research needs to be done, especially in the medical field. It just loves
yeah.
to symptomatically diagnose as opposed to unravel.
No, I got you on that because since even though we're one species and whatnot, everybody's different. At least their genetic makeup is a little different. So the treatment for one person or the diagnosis for one person may not be the diagnosis for another. You know what I mean? Everybody's
Yeah,
spectrum is everybody's spectrum is a little different and is tweaked a little bit, differently. Like I could be more on the ADHD side or OCD side versus someone else that could be more on the you know nonverbal or very touch
yeah,
sensitive or light sensitive kind of person.
yeah,
So
yeah,
everybody's a little different, and just because of the fact that they may not, they want to package everything clearly so that way they could, how can I say, because I feel that modern medicine kind of like wants to rush people in and out, especially in the States. I feel like it's
mhm,
just like one big like carousel. Like, okay, you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out, and there's no real. Let me stop and see what's actually going on. Let me get to the root of the problem. Let me fix this so that way this person could just walk out of here and never have to
yeah.
turn around and come back.
And the problem is as well that I'm speaking from Australia now. I don't know
Yeah,
what it's like for America. Yeah, I totally get that, and that's very much replicated in Australia. But with sort of someone going to the doctor for, anxiety or whatever, they'll give them a mental health plan, which gives them to a psychologist for 6 weeks. But the issue is there that psychology is more based on the talking and the releasing, and they're amazing. They're amazing at
yeah.
what they do. But when it's coming to traumas that someone can't remember, that's where you need the radical behavioralism, and that's where you need the epigenetics and the genealogical trauma put into place. Because someone can see a psychologist, like I've had people come to me, and this is just my experience, nothing against anyone else's profession, so be very careful. I've had people come to me that've been seeing a psychologist for a year, and they've done a lot of really amazing work, but
Yeah.
I work with people for 6 weeks. And I've taken people from suicidal thoughts to joy in 6 weeks through releasing genealogical trauma. But they will have been with a psychiatrist talking about different layers and different things and getting different coping mechanisms and all those sorts of things. But a year,
Mm.
why?
Nah, I get. I don't. I truly don't know. I would sit here and lie to you if I would try to explain it, but I truly don't know. I don't. The one thing I never really understood was that I know with certain traumas and certain people, they're gonna need to take their time, and I
Yeah,
get that. But on the flip side of that too, I also feel that it's a prolonged way of like curing people, and you're
yeah.
not really trying to get to the root as quickly. Yet again, I don't want to say as quickly as possible, but as directly as possible.
Yeah. And you've got to, and I've worked with a lot of people that I've, and I've just said, okay, so there's a lot, there's a certain type of emotion that I'm feeling here from you, or I can see it in your system. You've worked with someone before. What have you kind of worked through on that particular emotion,
Yeah.
right? So let's just use guilt as an example. And then they'll always talk to me about, oh yeah, I worked with somebody and we talked about this time in my life and this is where it came from and da, 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 da. I already know that they've understood cognitively where the guilt has come from, and they've done a lot of work and a lot of progression, and that's made them be freer in their environment. But now they're with me, so now they've still come back because they know something's not right, you know. But with each emotion there's like a little spider's legs. It's like a matrix of emotions. So when you've
Yeah.
got guilt, you've got different emotions, and this is where you're saying about your uniqueness. Everyone is unique.
Yeah.
So you could be working with the main emotion, guilt, but there might be 5 different subsidiary emotions attached to guilt. And unless you actually get all of the subsidiary emotions, you're not actually releasing the full capacity of guilt. And this is where people keep going back. This is why it takes the time, because they're working with the guilt. They have a conversation about the guilt. They release some of the guilt, but then it comes back, and then they've got to go
Mm,
again, because they're not getting all the unique to every person. Those different emotions are entirely unique to each individual, based on their environment, based on their sensitivities, based on what they're doing in their lives. So really, a lot of the time, all that's really happening is, imagine a kettle.
yeah, I got
You're
you.
lifting the
I'm
lid.
here with you. I'm here with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
You're
here with you.
lifting the lid and
Yeah.
letting the steam off. Makes you feel better for the short term, but then it comes back. And I worked with a lot of coaches back in the day, and they were just like, why are my clients coming back with the same thing? I was saying, because you're not getting the matrix. You're not getting all of the emotions attached to it.
And going back to your example with the kettle, they're just lifting the lid to release the pressure of the steam, but they're not just taking the kettle off the fire.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got you. I
Exactly.
got you. I got you. I got you. 100%. I
Yeah.
got you on that.
Yeah.
So,
We love analogies. We got a love spectrum.
but do you feel that like your clairvoyancy like kind of like gives you like a little edge when it comes to like your therapies and how you
Yeah.
help people?
Yeah, definitely. I'm so grateful to be able to work in the both. Like, my brain is very systems orientated,
Yeah,
very, really systems orientated, pattern orientated. Someone else will see a straight line and I'll see a whole circle. you know,
yeah,
it's like I see an ecosystems. That's like, when I'm looking at the world, I see in an ecosystem. I see patterns and I see how it's all connecting and where it's all at. And then I
yeah. I
kind
feel
of
you.
have to
No, I said I
go.
feel you on that. That's how I kind of think and how my world is too.
Yeah, right? It's
Yeah,
so, you're just like, "Oh." So when I view a human, I'm always in awe of humans. I'm just like, "Wow, they're just the most amazing, mechanics."
yeah,
And sometimes I feel like, I don't know, Inspector Gadget, for whatever springs to my mind. But, you're kind of going in and reorganizing little bits of the body and putting it all back in the right place,
yeah,
from a biological perspective. But then the divine, absolutely, because the clairvoyance allows me to go back and speak to, if you like,
yeah,
ancestors. But I hold the energy for my clients. So it's not actually me speaking to them. I hold the energy for my client to speak to multiple generations back that they have no knowledge of, to be able to actually communicate and say, this is why we did this. This is why this is happening. This is what happened in my life. And then my client's like, oh, that makes total sense. And then we can stand in the present moment energetically, look back over the time and understand how that one action or that one thing that happened 4 generations back, you can actually see how it impacted every other generation and then into the now. And when my clients see that, understand it, have the conversation for themselves, it's the emotion just comes straight out of the system. And then there's loads of space, because, as I said, guilt is all over the body. That's
yeah,
your autoimmune, thyroid, all of that. That's all guilt. Anger, heart, your inability to truly live in that frequency of love, because anger protrudes, and you've got to clear anger to be able to actually move into the frequency of love. Because when humans live in the frequency of love, that's when there becomes the oneness. And then the oneness is true oneness, not of trying to make other people agree to what you're saying. That's not
yeah,
oneness. It's literally going, You do you, I do me, and we're cool. It's
and we
not about
good.
hating each other, you know?
You know, I totally get that, and I don't understand like why people believe that oneness means that we have to believe the same things or go about life the same way. All
Yeah,
oneness is respecting each other and being like, all right, cool, you do you, I'll do me. As long as you're not hurting nobody, doing harm to nobody, we good.
exactly. Exactly. And that's right. But because there's so much genealogical hatred and so much separation in society for a reason, you know, because imagine if society actually became oneness, how would they make any money out of war or sport for that matter? You know, like,
I can see certain sports not being able to run anymore.
yeah,
But I still feel like people would still be kind of like toward because I don't really think that competitiveness like takes us out of oneness. It's just like I feel like as humans, we're always like tinkering and improving and evolving. So I think like that competitiveness is sort of like an evolutionary thing too. So I don't really see like competitiveness when it goes to like a grander scale like war and taking resources. Of course, that's horrible.
yeah.
But like in a game, like that's what makes it fun. You know what I mean? When you're playing Uno,
Sport,
how
sport
about
is fine.
yeah?
It's the crowd.
Okay,
I'm talking about the crowd. You know,
okay, I
it's
got you.
and let's talk about English football.
Oh man,
Right? I've proven my point.
oh the soccer hooligans.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's just so you've got I'm just using like I have nothing but my daughter is obsessed and actually played American football in Australia.
Nice.
Yeah. She's she has talked about America since she could speak, like obsessed with the
Yeah,
country. As soon as she could play NFL, and she actually trained in Brisbane in Logan so she was like 16, 17 when she finally
yeah.
was able to get into NFL, but she trained with the adult males. And then she ended up playing for Queensland and Victoria. Loves the sport. Doesn't look
Nice.
like it. She does like a little model and she's tiny, but she's made of concrete, this kid. So,
Yeah.
you know, but from that perspective, sport, amazing. Absolutely. Great
Amazing.
mentorship, great competitive, great mindset, feeling part of a team, all of that stuff. The bit that I'm talking about is the Coliseum attitude,
Oh yeah. I get what you mean. I
Yeah.
get what you mean. People do get people do tend to get a little rowdy.
Yeah, they do. They do. They do. And I remember being in where was I? I think it was Andorra or something, and skiing, and the organizers decided it would be a great idea to take us all down the mountain to a football match, but they bought us the cheapest tickets, and it was two of the roughest teams playing each other,
Mm.
right? So I'm talking they were checking for knives going in, but they completely ignored buckets of fireworks and all of this. So we were in like the rebel
No,
stands.
they were like no sharp objects, but the explosives perfectly fine. Come on, guys.
That's fine. Explosives. We couldn't even see the match for like the first half because there was so much smoke on the pitch, and then they were throwing chairs down. Like it was
Nah, that's
complete
crazy.
chaos. But they were waving the Union Jack, and I was like, "Why are they waving the Union Jack? We're not. There's no one playing that's got anything to do with England. What's happening?" And they were like, "Because that shows that they want to fight."
I don't get it. I don't get it.
All
Why?
right. So then we've got a bunch of like snow resort people in the middle of basically a riot and all getting taken out. Like one team had to leave
Yeah.
first and then the second team was released and all of that. So it's team sport, yes. Riots, fighting, it's separation. Separation then becomes countries, or even in England, for example, north against south and then county
Yeah.
against county. And, it's like that all over the world. So this is your separation of oneness, but it starts in this, what we're taught in school around history. I mean, history keeps changing. Things,
All the time.
things keep, yeah,
All the time. History keeps changing, and then I also feel that a lot of like history is also like kept from us as
yeah.
well. I feel yeah. So I completely get that.
Yeah, so with things changing and then the pressures of society and then all of this stuff, and then genealogical trauma and people not focused on being with themselves. Even people sort of sitting with themselves, people have a lot of guilt around doing that. They should be doing something else. Sitting with yourself is not productive. You're not making the most of your day. You're
Yeah.
not, you're not achieving anything by sitting talking to yourself. And I just wrote a piece on evolution, just going, if you don't sit and communicate with yourself, you're not going to know who you are, least of all why you're here. So everyone's always talking about, I need to find my purpose and I need to do this. Well, if you don't have a conversation with yourself, you don't even know who you are. And if you don't know
No.
who you are, then you're not going to know how to design your life. Like life is a conscious creation. I have a process, but it's a conscious creation and it involves certain steps. And when you have your quadrants of life and they all start operating together, that's when you move into fulfillment. When you move into fulfillment, that's when your purpose becomes visible, but not until you're in fulfillment. And a lot of healing work is
Yeah.
around going back, releasing a past life. This is what you're here for. Now go and be fulfilled. And that's why the spiritual industry, I think a few years ago, the spiritual kind of industry was a multi-million dollar industry. Now
Yeah.
it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. But is it solving anything? I mean, how many rose quartz can someone buy?
Well, yeah. Yeah. When you say it like that, I completely get it. Like the whole crystal thing, and like, when people are like trying to like milk people for like, because I feel that with the awakening of people like trying to figure out spirituality now is because that
Yeah,
was taken away from us for so many centuries. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
we have all these big, and I don't want to crack. Matter of fact, I was born Catholic. I went to a Catholic church. I'll use the Catholic Church as an example, right? Like for
Yep.
instance, the Catholic Church put a lot of pressure on Europe and the Middle East. During the 1000 to like 1500s to basically make convert people into Christianity. You know what I mean? And they put that pressure on them
Yeah,
instead of and they took away a lot of spiritual things that people used to practice, and those lessons were lost, and we kind of like forgot how to like reflect interiorly, but we're always trying to look for something exteriorly.
exactly.
If that makes any sense.
Exactly. Absolutely. And that same story is applied over so many different aspects of society that we live.
Yeah.
Like externally speaking is your education system.
Yeah.
Unless you're ticking the boxes of that education system, then you're deemed a failure. But it's not that you're a failure in any way. It's just that your brain sees in a different way and wants to evolve things that you're taught, or whatever. And you can't learn by rote. You need to learn by experience through senses. But if you can't learn by experiences and senses, like in the Montessori teaching, for example, then
Yeah.
you're considered a liability within the schooling system, because now you can't sit still and you can't listen. But it's because it's rote is boring. But
No,
and
it's not.
unfortunately, yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of people get measured by that system and might come from environments that believe in that system. And so they carry for the rest of their lives that they're a failure. Like I failed everything at school. Everything. I failed. I was crippled by shyness for a start. I failed
Yeah.
everything at school. But then when I went to university, I got top 10% of university. But I'm a little bit of a warrior soul in that way. I don't really
Yeah.
like anyone telling me what to do. So I think that kind of kept me safe from not believing, oh, I failed at school, therefore I failed, because that's the only measure in the world that exists. I've never believed that. I've always stayed out
Yeah.
of that as much as possible in my own brain, if you like. I mean, I remember as a 5-year old, I used to ask my mum to pick me up from school and take me to the whales because I wanted to save them. So I had bigger things to worry about than whether or not my teacher liked me.
No, but it's true. It's like every kid learns differently. Some kids could learn by sitting down and reading books. Some kids just have to experience it, or some kids have to be taught through play. And I
Yeah,
don't feel like the educational system now is allowing those realms to exist, where you could teach, where you might have little Johnny who's hyperactive. They want to say he has ADHD, but the fact he just has a little bit of more energy, and if you would play a game with him, he'll probably learn his multiplication tables 10 times faster than just sitting
than
there and
anyone else.
writing it out.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's the whole kind of thing. So when you're talking about religion, then you can apply
Mm,
that same thing to the education system. You can apply that same thing to the education system and then beyond. You know, really, everyone's being educated to fall into line with get a job, get a mortgage, and let's just hope economically no one actually makes it to retirement because that's going to cost too much money.
that's a
I
big
know
fact.
that's really hardcore, but that is, and that's kind of what is happening, you know?
Yep.
So it's following that line, and those people that don't follow that line, they are the black sheep, if you like. You know, it's that whole thing of I've always felt isolated from society, and I've really tried, tried to fit in, but I just haven't been able to, and I really just want to do my own thing. And it's really cool traveling because
Yeah.
it's you're just meeting all these people, and I'm meeting more and more people actually with sensitivities or
Yeah.
noticing it more maybe now that I've had a big block here in Vietnam on my own. um you can see these people have just basically, and they haven't necessarily come with lots of money so now they can retire. They've come on an absolute budget, but they just can't fit into the societies from the countries that they were born to or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
No, I
They're
get what
too
you mean.
sensitive, too much stress. And so they're choosing to come to places like Vietnam, where, yes, it is cheaper to live, but also the cultures of those places are about connection. They are about culture. You know, they feel safe and supported in these types of environment that still have that connection. They all know each other. Whereas I don't know about America, but Australia, we don't, or England even, you don't know your neighbors, you don't know anyone.
Yeah. Like it's rare for you to know like all your neighbors. Like I live in New York City, so it's I don't know everybody who lives in my building. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I know a few people. That's what it is. But at the end of the day, like it's different from when I go back to like the Dominican Republic, where I know everybody in a 3 mile radius. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And everything is a lot slower, and you could kind of like digest the day easier versus like
Yeah.
the hustle and bustle of New York, where I'm like, okay, cool, I got to be up at 5 to get to work at 8. Then hopefully nothing like messes up my commute and like somebody gets hurt because that's a possibility, or somebody jumps on the train and messes thing up. But you know what I mean?
God. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like worries like that kind of like I would say like kind of like put your nervous system into like kind of a state of shock every day
Yeah.
because it's like when you do finally get time to like actually sit down and like fully relax and like let your guard down is like this weight that just like dissolves.
Yeah. And that's what's happening. You know, a lot of people are living fundamentally in fight or flight,
Yeah.
and that's sort of that's the basis, and then depending on what's going on in society, that's going to enhance your fight or flight and your over vigilance. um and actually that's where a lot of the spiritual and the science kind of crosses over too. It's like a lot of people teach looking out of your third eye, but if you're looking out of your third eye, you are literally blocking the window. How are you supposed to look out of your third eye with your big face stuck to the window? You're not going to see
True.
anything, because the third eye is actually about receivership. So one of the first things that I do with someone who has strong fight flight, they have learned to use their intuition to be able to almost assess the environment to which they're going. So say a kid's coming home from school and they know they're going into an unstable environment. That kid, their fight flight and their intuition is almost looking into that house and understanding what's happening in that house before they even get there. You know
No,
what
I
I
get
mean?
that.
Right? And
Yeah.
then when you walk into the house, you can feel it straight away. And you just want to go, I'm going straight to my room. I don't even need to meet anyone in this house right now. I know exactly what's happening. I'm gone.
Mm,
But that is using your intuitive capacity to decide whether or not you're safe. So one of the first things that I do is imagine, I always say to people, imagine in the top of your head, there's a sofa, and you're going to make yourself super comfortable, and there's some drinks and some snacks, and you're going to go and make yourself really little, and you're going to sit on the sofa. As soon as you do that in a little meditative state, the doors and the windows all open. And then there's a calm because information is received to you. So information comes down through the divine, through your crown chakra, out through your third eye, and then comes back to your third eye. And you receive that way. So if you're standing looking out of the window, all stressed out, looking for danger, what are you receiving about fulfillment or what you should be doing in your life? Nothing.
Nothing, because you're not allowing the view to come in.
Exactly.
That's so. No, it's true. It's true though. Like, do you feel that a lot of people nowadays aren't listening to like their intuition, or like not, or like constantly like rejecting their, I don't want to say purpose, but their path?
Yeah. Absolutely. That's what people will say to me, I'm going through this, I'm going through that, and it's a real struggle and I feel stuck and I just with the universe will give me a sign. And I'm like, well, if you weren't if you could just do anything right now, what would it be? Oh, I would go and change my job completely, or I would go traveling, or I would do any number of things. And I'm like, okay, and which one comes to your mind the most? This one. Well, that's the sign from the universe.
Mm.
That is the sign. But you're sitting in, I've got to get a job and I've got to do this. If someone's lost their job or something, whatever, something's happened, I've got to resolve this problem. But if you took time out, listen to your intuition, calmed your central nervous system, maybe there's a completely different job for you that wouldn't necessarily be as highly regarded. So it doesn't feed the ego. It doesn't feed your status. Because don't forget, everyone's really, consumerism has made status
Yeah.
be a whole thing.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
it might not be the job that your parents think is amazing, or you can go, oh, I'm a whatever, it makes you feel all great as you're
Like,
staying there
ooh.
with your designer bag made for $2 in China. It cost you 2 grand. Your shoes, like it's all of that. You might be being called to go and be I don't know, go and live in an ashram so you can counsel people as they're coming in and help them or something. But that's your purpose, that's your fulfillment. But scrolling social media tells you fulfillment is good job, fast cars, expensive bags. You know what I mean? So if you're
Yeah.
living in that society that's on that rat race, you suddenly stopping everything, everyone's going to think you've had a midlife crisis, right? Or a mental breakdown. And then you get all those labels,
Or
so
or multiple life crises.
yeah, exactly. I know. I always laugh when people say, "Oh yeah, midlife crisis is going." Which one?
Which one? At what point?
Yeah.
Because I
When is it
swear,
just not going to be a midlife crisis anymore? It's just a life crisis.
I think everybody goes through at least two every decade.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
A 5 year like cycle. Once every 5 years, you get one crisis that you got to deal with.
Yeah.
Like the universe and life keeping you on your toes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They're just opportunities for change. I'm just like, yeah, I'm all about like the embodiment of learning and understanding the science, understanding all of that and having the divine and all the rest of it. It's just like every situation that occurs in my life is all a lesson. It's just all a lesson. So not attached to the person that's done something or I've done, it's not the person or it's the lesson. What was the lesson that you learned?
Mm.
Because
It's so.
learning that lesson allows you to be detached from whatever circumstance it was that taught you the lesson, which prevents you then going into the regret and I should have done this and I should have done that and what would have happened? Blah. It's like, who cares? What was the lesson?
Do you feel like people hang on more to like the regret or what I should have done versus like the lesson they learned? They're like, oh yeah, I went through all of this. I learned this, but damn, I really should have done all of that. And they kind of like focusing on that versus like, yeah, but you learned this and you're doing better because you learned this now. But why are you still focused on this?
I think a lot of people actually don't even know that there's a lesson to learn. I think a lot of people just sit in, and I don't really like this as a term like victim mentality. It sounds so harsh, but it's the more that's really unfair. Life's really unfair, and I didn't do anything to deserve that. I didn't actually do anything in my life from a karmic debt perspective, even to
Yeah.
deserve having that done to me. And I think that's where people sit a lot more.
Mm.
And then and that's just friends, that's just that's not in a coaching session or a
Yeah.
guidance session with me. That's just the mentality. It's like I didn't do anything to deserve that, and had I done this it would have been different, and maybe I should have done this, da, 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 da. And you're just going down a rabbit hole. And I think that more emphasis should be on things happen, things happen.
Yeah.
And if you can learn the lesson from it and take that lesson as power, then you move forward in your life, not making that same pattern, because mostly lessons are repeated. They're different every time because the universe is going, let me give you this situation. Okay, you're not going to learn from that situation. Let me give you another one, so they can look, the lessons can look slightly different, but
But
the lesson is the same lesson that you need to learn, what I mean? And it's
no,
sometimes interesting for people to try and, understand that these 5 situations that played out differently were literally the universe giving you different opportunities to learn the same lesson because you didn't get it the first time or the second time or the third time. Maybe you'll get it this time if I show it to you like a teacher. The
yeah.
universe is a teacher trying to explain, let's use maths, trying to explain maths in 5 different ways until one of those ways that student goes, I got it now,
It's like teaching a kid.
Yeah.
It's like teaching, if you got up 1 + 1 is 2. All right, it's not 3. If you have 1 and you have 1, what is it? 2. Okay. 5 minutes later, what's 1 + 1? 4. Okay, let's do this again until they finally get it.
Exactly.
But I also
Exactly.
feel that humans, even though like our species has been here for like a couple of 100,000 years, like Homo sapien, I feel like the modern human is still very young in its evolutionary line. Like I feel that we're still like on like I still feel like we're like less than we're over the age of 1, but we're not
Yeah,
2. Yeah.
I know. I just wrote a paper about, I don't know, I can't remember like ever because I download my articles and then I barely can even remember what I wrote about. But one of my articles that ends with, exactly that. Humans have been here for like however long we've been here, but actually, what have we been doing? What have we actually been doing? Because when you look at society now, what difference is there really? It's all much more coercive, subversive, or whatever fancy words you want to use to describe things. But fundamentally, we're still running around fighting each other and hunting. We're still doing caveman activities. We
Yeah,
still don't understand introspection, sitting with self, evolution. We don't have a vision of where we want to go to as a collective society. We don't even know what a collective society even looks like. The question at the end of the article was like, literally, what have we been doing? Honestly, what have we been doing?
just just tinkering and making
Just running
things
around.
more destructive.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
just exactly. More intellectually destructive,
Yep.
and and actually just as we're having this moment, it's like a sudden download there of, yeah, you're right, we've become more effective in our destruction, but with a capacity to have a detachment from it because we've up leveled our weaponry and everything. So we're no longer standing on a field having a fight. We're actually doing it via drones, remote. We're not even
Yeah.
attached to or even really seeing what it is that we're attacking because it's on such a high level. It's just
Yeah.
like, that's the building we're going to blow up, bang, gone. But we're not even running into the building now and seeing the people. Like, there's
Nope.
no connection. So we're even detached from the wars, really. Just as you said that, I just had this, wow, yeah, we've become really good at
And a great
creating
example
violence without actually doing it.
and a great example of that is like, all right, for instance, like let's say, 20, 30 years down the future when, we have like robots on the battlefield. It's like
Yeah,
you could give kids a controller or anybody a controller. Hey, this is the new whatever game, just play it. Next thing you know,
yeah,
they're like, oh, the graphics are so realistic, and they don't even realize that they're actually controlling a humanoid robot and is causing all this massive destruction because of the fact that we play extremely violent games, and I have nothing against extremely violent games because I consume that too. But
yeah,
when things are like behind the screen, we kind of have that detachment between, all right, things from this side of the screen is reality, things on the screen isn't reality.
yeah. That's right. And the human brain can watch a movie which you cognitively know is not real, but you're
Yeah,
still sitting there crying or getting upset about it or whatever. You're still having an emotional reaction to what you're viewing into, movies and stuff. I love
yeah.
movies, but you know, but I can only really consume, I can do anything without blood, basically. So I'm like, paranormal activity is completely fine for me, but I don't know. I can't even think of something. I don't know. chainsaw massacre or something. I don't know. Anything to do with blood, I'm not for it. But anything to do with
you're not with the
ghosts,
gore. You're not with the
yeah,
gory
I'm
stuff.
not with the gore because it really makes me yeah, it really makes me tap into. It just makes me mad because then I just tap into the whole like evolutionary consciousness
Yeah.
thing where people's brains don't know what's real or not, and then I just have a massive meltdown. Whereas when I'm watching a horror movie about ghosts, I'm good because I know that's not real.
No, I get that. I get that. Yo.
You know? But yeah, so it's very interesting. Exactly. Oh God. Imagine that though. Imagine that actually becoming a reality where you've got people playing. So that means then that if that were to happen, then they would have militarized, if that's even a word, entire societies as opposed to having people joining the military
Yeah.
because they would be
And
playing
and
games in their own homes.
and the best people that would be playing it would be the youngest kids around because they have nothing. They'll be attached to it. They'll make it addictive. They'll make it like,
Yeah.
hey, mom, if it's like a good example is like Roblox, right?
Yeah.
Kids love Roblox. And their parents are forced, some parents are forced to get Robux for their kids. So it's like, not only will your kids play for the military, but they also will pay the military money for their upgrades.
Oh my God. This is like, what's the, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard in such a bad way, but this is the coolest thing. In terms of like, wow, what's that? But like, because my particular spectrum doesn't
Yeah.
allow me to read books at all. I have all the spiritual books and all the thing. I love looking at them, but reading books makes me go to sleep. And because I'm auditory,
I feel you. I got that. It's like that
yeah,
sometimes.
I cannot. And I remember one of my friends in my community, I was like, guess what? I actually opened the Prophet. And she went, oh, yeah, because everyone knows. How far did you get? And I was like, halfway through the preface. And I was asleep. And she goes, who reads the preface for a start? And I was like,
Like,
me.
what you know?
But but I cannot. And I also don't listen to the news or consume anything like that because I want to keep my channel pure. So generally
Yeah.
speaking, I don't research anything unless I'm directed to do so by what I receive, like the RNA situation.
Yeah.
But then I don't have to go and do a whole course on epigenetics. I just go and learn the bit I need to learn and then bring that into my work, So yeah, but imagine there's like, was it Oswald? Is it Oswald or something? He wrote a book of what it would be like in the future.
Oh, 1984. You're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like a whole 1984 kind of manuscript of the future of the military and the social manipulation and implication. That's like a whole movie right there you just created.
I just hope the wrong person didn't just hear that end of that part and said, you know what,
That's a great idea.
you sir have a great idea.
I know. I was somewhat thinking the same thing. I was thinking, maybe we should just like precursor that one with this is an imaginary idea and humans will know the difference.
All I'm saying, if y'all do it, you get 50%.
Okay, done.
Whoa, Mazona, before we get out of here, there's one question I always ask everybody that's on the show. Do you have any final thoughts or any advice for the roomies before we get out of here?
I think sit with yourself. Ask yourself, what is it that you really want to do with your life? And then take steps to doing that, regardless of what anyone says about it or anything. Because there is a reason why you're receiving that message of inspiration. And you are not going to know all the steps necessary to create any kind of outcome. And you just got to trust. And you got to learn to trust yourself. And you got to trust that the path will open as you move down it. That's it.
I feel you on that. And roomies, remember, listen to your intuition and love everybody and kind of respect what they do. Besides that, peace out.
Exactly.